Hello. Some of you watching this in America or Australia, I seem to have quite a few viewers in Australia, and thank you very much. As I say, I'm constantly surprised by the Australians' ability to do most things quite well and upside down. So there you are. I'm not being in the least patronising, am I? Right, I have relatives in Australia. Does that make me all right? I've got relatives all over the place, actually. Okay, Lisa Nandy, it says here in The Sun, was in a fresh woke row over changing the nature of the British Army and reconsidering Britain's nuclear subfleet. Now, Lisa Nandy is the shadow foreign secretary. And again, for people in America who might not know too much about the British political system, there are two governments. One is the government in power, at present the Conservatives, and the other one is the Labour Party, the opposition, the biggest opposition party, who will have a shadow for everything that the party in power will do. The idea is that they could take over in a day, and indeed they do, as the British electoral system means that when a government is elected, it is elected the next day. The elections are traditionally held on Thursday. If the party in power loses, then on Friday morning or Friday afternoon, the Prime Minister of the old government is already moving out of 10 Downing Street. And then over the weekend, the new Prime Minister is moving in. And by Monday morning, that new Prime Minister is already having talks, or maybe even earlier, with his or her cabinet for policies and that sort of thing. It's very, very quick, extremely brutal to the losers, of course, and very quick. And I suppose in many ways a lot better than the American system, where the agony is drawn out. It's like pulling a plaster, off a wound, and you've got it there, and you can either pull it very slowly and every second of it hurts, or you can just go like that and off it comes and it's all over. So there is a shadow cabinet which is in charge of putting policies forward. This means that the electorate, if they are reading newspapers and keeping an eye on things, they can keep an eye on the policies of the government. They might promise of the opposition. So in general, you might get the opposition promising you the moon and the stars, but all you've got to do is look at the pronouncements over time of the ministers, the shadow ministers, to get a much better idea of what that government is going to do when in office. So Lisa Nandy is the shadow foreign secretary. And she sparked a row when she made a speech in which she talked about a changing role for the army and a reconsideration of Trident, which is a nuclear submarine missile. Now, here I have, this is a disclaimer in The Sun. Obviously, they jumped the gun. They said, oh, Lisa Nandy wants to abolish the army altogether. Actually, she probably does, but that's not what she said. The clarification, the headline on an earlier version of this article referred to a proposal for abolishing the army. The open Labour proposals at issue called for the armed forces to be replaced by human security services that would include the military. And so they've amended their article. So I didn't see the earlier one, but I assume that headline would have said something like Lisa Nandy wants to abolish the army. Well, that's very typical of The Sun. All right, interviewed by the BBC, Nandy told the BBC that it was complete and utter rubbish, that she'd applauded the loony left wish list of sort of doing away with the army. But she was left red-faced, according to The Sun, when a recording of a Zoom call emerged where she said, "One of the things that I found really inspirational about this pamphlet is that I think it's based on the belief that I also share, that while we learn from the past, we are never bound to it, and we have to build a foreign policy fit for this century." And the introduction to Open Labour's policy document, which says a progressive foreign policy, when you see the word progressive, you should always get a little bit nervous, if you have any sense. It said that Britain should consider a real shift in the nature of our services from classic armed forces to what one might call human security services, which would include the military, but would also include police, engineers, aid workers or health workers, and would be gender balanced and ethnically diverse. And that's where the problem is. You see, I could see some idea about the army and the health services being integrated in some way, but I think that's quite dangerous, actually. But I can see the argument. But when they start talking about gender balance and ethnically diverse, quite frankly, if I were the victim of a bomb attack and some person came rushing up to help me, and I said, "Well, are you a medical person?" And this person says, "No, but I got a first in gender studies from Birmingham University," I would not be that relieved to see that person with a roll of bandages in his or her or hers hand, frankly. So when you hear this gender balanced and ethnically diverse, what it means is you're going to be choosing people according not to the content of their character, but the colour of their skin or the shape of their hips. And I disagree with that very profoundly. I think that's a sign of rot, actually, as probably do most of the people who watch my videos. She carries on. Their central task will be to protect human security. Now, what do you mean by protect human security? That's just a set of buzzwords, isn't it? And you could see that there's a problem there with how she's thinking. You're not protecting human security, you're protecting people, or you're enforcing security. You're not protecting human security. As a matter of fact, when you're protecting security, you are not protecting people. The Russian army, or rather the secret services, the KGB, they would have regarded themselves as protecting security, wouldn't they? Not people. And in cases of war, to dampen down violence rather than intervene on one side or the other. Well, actually, the central task of the army, the way I see it, and I should think the way most people see it, is to protect the people of this country from hostile actions of another country or group of some sort. That's their central purpose. It is not to dampen down violence or intervene on one side or the other. It is to protect me, my family, my children, my neighbours, my street, my town, my shire, my country. That's what the army is for. And obviously, you're going to have to take sides when you do that. Ms. Nandy spoke at the report's virtual launch last month, so it was launched virtually, but her praise was slammed by an ex-Labour Defence Minister, Kevin Jones, who said it would hinder the party's recovery in the north. And he's right. And he gave the reason. Now, it's a very pragmatic reason. It's probably not a moral one, but he's right anyway. Mr. Jones told the Mail on Sunday, "Isn't it funny how all these newspapers report each other's reports? There's something wrong with that too." Mr. Jones told the Mail on Sunday, "Our armed forces are there to defend us." Yes, he agrees with me. For once, I agree with a Labour MP, sometimes in very challenging circumstances. As a party, Labour should be proud of them and defend them. not seek to turn them into some sort of peace corps that dampens down violence. So that's all very well and good. But then he cuts to the chase. Before we start talking this nonsense, we should remember that many of the recruits come from northern working class roots in constituencies that are, or used to be, Labour strongholds. And there you have it. Many soldiers come from working class families, and they are not going to take too well to being some sort of a, well, namby-pamby Peace Corps. Right, so when, I've got a bit off the subject here, when Kevin Jones said, we should remember that many of the recruits come from northern working class roots in constituencies that used to be or are Labour strongholds, he was thinking of this stuff about gender balance and all these woke ideas. It doesn't wash in the north. And he couldn't say it the way I just said it, but yeah, that's what he was thinking of. So the Tory party chairman, Amanda Milling, hit back. Labour claim they're under new management, but Lisa Nandy's car crash week on Churchill, I didn't see that, and now our armed forces shows it's the same old Labour. I'll have to look to what Nandy said about Churchill. Hang on a minute. Oh, okay, right. This is from the 26th of January. And it says here, this is from the Mail, Lisa Nandy in new wokery row as toe-curling video emerges in which Labour Shadow Foreign Secretary refuses to say if Winston Churchill was a hero or a villain. Okay, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Lisa Nandy, was embroiled in a new wokery row today over a video in which she was unable to describe Winston Churchill as a hero. The Labour Shadow Foreign Secretary was asked if the Second World War Prime Minister was a hero or villain in an appearance on Question Time and branded it a stupid question. Yeah, that's rather like Biden when anybody asks him too close a question. He says, come on, man, give me a break, or words to that effect. It's the same thing. It's when you can't think of a reasonable answer. It came after John McDonnell, Labour's then hard-left Shadow Chancellor, had branded Churchill a villain for sending soldiers to suppress a miners' strike in South Wales in 1910. Yeah, Churchill, he was guilty of that, and there are many people in Wales who still carry a grudge against Churchill for that. I believe that Churchill actually said something like, when he was told they were starving, something like they can eat grass. Or, I may be wrong there, but I know that's the story that used to go around in the mining villages. So they certainly have a right to feel angry about him. But it's the same situation as any of these other, the things that turn up on Twitter, and you take something from when from what somebody said or did when they were young, and then you completely ignore what they did later on, when they'd matured a bit, when they had more sense, when they'd learnt a bit more. And this is why it's important to have an opposition party with shadow ministers in place, because you will get a good idea of the attitude of the government that you might have to elect into office at some future date. So that's the fuss about Lisa Nandy and the fuss about wokery and the discussion about the army. And yeah, why I disagree even with the idea of getting everything in one go. In many other countries, for instance, the police are actually a part of the military. You see that all the time. And because of that, you have a complete grip on the country's levers of control. And that's very dangerous. For instance, If a soldier refuses to carry out an order, he could be shot for mutiny, something like that. If a policeman refuses to carry out an order, he can be sacked, but that's as far as it goes. There's a big difference in consequences and a big difference in the attitude of each to the people they're supposed to be controlling. Now, I know that the police in Britain have got really nasty over the COVID lockdown. And there's a video that went viral, which I might make a video about, where a policeman calls an ordinary civilian an idiot because he refused to answer some personal questions which the police had no right to ask him. But that's the point. He's not a soldier, and he can be sacked for acting in that way. A soldier might be internally disciplined. There's a difference. All right, well, that's it. And so not only do I think Nandy is wrong in her idea about ethnically diverse and that sort of thing, but I feel that she's wrong in the idea of a police force that's part of the military. That's a very typically authoritarian view, which is why I don't vote for the Labour Party in the first place. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and T-shirts come in the Grannyopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.grannyopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.